Hello, welcome again to Veeam's Industry Insights live stream. Uh, Delighted to have you here with us today, wherever you're joining us from. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I am joined today by Aaron Murphy, who is the Field Chief Technology Officer for Americas for Veeam's product strategy team and a member of my team. Aaron, I'll let you introduce yourself today.
Thanks, Jeff. As Jeff said, Aaron Murphy, Field CTO for the Americas. Love working here at Veeam and talking to customers all about incident response plans. So this is a kind of one of my favorite subjects, Jeff.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun. And Aaron has been traveling around North America, both Canada and the United States, doing incident response tabletop drills with Veeam customers and with other organizations to sort of let people get a read on what the pitfalls are that they might not be realizing about ransomware response and perhaps some areas that they can raise their game. I'm going to let Aaron talk us through a couple of things, beginning with, as you know, we love here on Industry Insights, a little bit of Veeam research. But before we jump in, I would encourage you on whatever platform you are watching today's live stream from, please do ask questions in the event chat. We will get them in our chat and do our absolute best to answer them as we go through the talk today. Also, if you could register where you're from, just drop into the chat where you're joining us from. We will pause a couple of times during today's live stream to update our map with where we have folks logging in from and joining the live stream from today. So Aaron, let's go ahead and start with a little bit of background for our viewers. Can you talk us through the numbers on the slide here?
Yeah, so some of our regular viewers might have seen these slides before, but I'm going to talk to them in maybe a little different way. And actually, the 75%, the number of organizations who responded saying they'd had at least one ransomware attack. You know, I go to a lot of events. That's fairly common in the industry. It's, you know, late 60s to mid 70s, and everybody kind of has this similar stat. But it's always good to remind everyone of the likelihood of an attack. But more importantly, and what we're talking about today, is recovery. And I think the other stats kind of a little shocking if interesting, but there's maybe more going on, and we can only second guess it, but we're guessing it from our experience. So, you know, 15% of organizations were able to recover without paying the ransom. But maybe, even though we know recovery is the best way to do a recovery from backup is the best way to get out of a ransom, sometimes business pressure, lack of knowledge as to how long it's going to take, not being able to fully estimate the cost of doing recovery might force some organizations we know to taking a risk in paying the ransom in the belief, probably mistaken belief, that might get them back up in business quicker. So that's one thing that's going on, and we know that from experiential learning. The other one is that 27% of organizations paid the ransom and never got their data back. Now, I think because this is a general survey of all organizations, no matter what products or what services they used, what advice they got, is why you see that figure. Now, wouldn't it be better if we'd already analyzed your estate, if we had the capabilities to analyze the files in your environment that had been encrypted, and we're able to know beforehand both the history of that threat actor and whether their keys worked, but also if the files were themselves recoverable and not corrupted in some way, because that's one of the learnings. Files can get corrupted. These attackers are not always as experienced as, you know, we sometimes like to tell ourselves, and sometimes organizations do things like switch off machines, and that can cause corruption to the files themselves. But if you have already analyzed your environment, you should be in a better position. Maybe if you did have the decryption key, you'd more likely get 99 to 100% of the data back. But it's all to do with levels of knowledge and preparation.
Right, exactly. Now, let's talk about, sticking with the research, Aaron, let's talk about why we aren't seeing the correct levels of knowledge and preparation, because this is something that we ask about. And candidly, I find the information you've got on this research slide to be fascinating about why we are in the position that we're in right now.
Yeah, well, we didn't want to put too many slides on the data, but it kind of, this slide doesn't really stand alone. When we asked organizations what they'd like to see, the organizations themselves are saying they would like to see alignment between cyber and backup teams. And it's probably because 75% of the respondees had had an attack that they learned this was critically important. So then we asked them, how much alignment is there? And what you can see here is that, over 50% need significant changes, and really across the board, changes need to be had. There isn't alignment between those teams. And that presents itself in an incident response with, say, the person managing the event asking, say, someone in a backup and restore team how long it takes to recover. Well, recovery is well known and the speed of it is known, and so they maybe overestimate the ability to recover because they're not aware of all the things that the cyber team, the forensics analysis team, whether that's someone in-house or someone you've brought in on a retainer, how much work they need to do to both contain and eradicate the threat, and also make sure when you restore, you're not bringing back any threat out to permanence. So that's why organizations are asking for themselves to be aligned, but also recognize that they themselves are not yet aligned and they need to do some work on that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right to point out that the 75% slide that we looked at just a minute ago, that stat and this stat are intimately related. If we don't have the cybersecurity teams who traditionally have thought about things like network security and identity and access management and topics like that, aligned with the infrastructure and operations teams, then you're almost guaranteed to have the kind of bad results that we looked at with that 75%. You're exactly right. It's not really a shock. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We're 7 minutes into today's live stream now. And Felicia, if you could put up our map, we will look at who we're being joined from today. If you notice in North and Central America, we have folks dialed in from Texas, from Ohio. We also have New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, British Columbia. I am in lovely Vancouver, Canada. We also have Virginia and Arizona dialed in. In Europe, we have folks dialed in from the UK, also from Spain, Germany, and from Denmark. Switching back down to the Americas, going to South America, we have someone viewing today from Brazil. Thank you very much for signing in today. And then moving back east again from Africa, we have a viewer joining from Egypt. So really appreciate all the folks that are on listening to this. I'm excited to be here because Aaron, as I said, has been doing a lot of these incident response plan talks with organizations around North America specifically. And so I'm interested in what you've learned in the course of those talks. What can you share if we switch gears a little bit back to sort of traditional network security or how the threat actors get into the environments of their victims, Aaron? Talk us through what we've seen.
Okay, so I put this slide up at compounding failures in the cyber kill chain, but honestly, when I look at this, Jeff, I see this as positive, so I'll explain what I mean. First off, for many years, I think some people ask the question, why do backup and recovery vendors talk a lot about cybersecurity? And the reason is, once an incident response team has identified a threat and they're busy containing and eradicating that threat, the first question they ask is, do you have good backups and have you tested them, right? So, and that's why we're at the end of this chain. It's your last line of defense and capability to recover in the event of an attack. But upstream from that, it doesn't start and end with something like malicious phishing, which itself is either a failure of training or it's a failure of filtering, or it could be that you're a target of choice and the threat actor's done something particularly clever. I heard of one recently where they were targeting an organization specifically for intellectual property, and instead of targeting the organization directly, went to the CEO's, the school where his children went to, broke into the principal's account, and then sent a legitimate email with a lure to phish, which is much harder to detect, right? But that doesn't mean we're going to be in a whole world of pain. There's so many other opportunities. Do you have multi-factor authentication everywhere? Least privilege? Do you allow your general user population to have things like command scripting or PSExec executed on their machine, known tactics of the threat actors? Do you have EDR in place, like behavioral EDR, so you know what is normal for those users? Which systems do they go to? Which systems do they not go to? Do you control which applications they install or implement? Do you give them the right to install things? Do you allow them to bring their own device and access everything, or does it limit what they're accessing? You know, maybe the more important critical information should be separated. And then you know, get into the next section. Do you segment to prevent a breach, allowing the threat actor to move laterally and to gain more information and more knowledge, and all the other things you can see on here? Do you have a SOC? Are you monitoring it? Do you have good quality information passed between different applications and different systems in your environment? So really, there's a lot of things going on that you can do to be prepared. And we've traditionally always been about preparing, making sure you have good backups, they're immutable, they're protected, and they're tested. But there's so much more in your environment you can do to make sure you never need to get to that point.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I think what's interesting to me is that Veeam, who is by market share the #1 data protection solution used by organizations globally, as you say, we've focused previously on recovering data from a variety kinds of bad things that can happen to your data, whether deliberate destruction by a ransomware actor or an internal actor, or all the kinds of accidents that have destroyed our data forever, from natural disasters to power outages, et cetera. And what's interesting is that the conversation now has to be more holistic than that, because backup is such a critical part of every organization's security posture, and organizations can't ignore security. It's not an option, considering that we're basically all being audited by very sophisticated threat actors every single day, and we need to have a plan to recover. So when you walk through incident response with organizations that you talk to about this, Aaron, talk us through the way you frame the conversation.
Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more on this later, but what we're really doing is looking at an incident response lifecycle, and this is the one we typically use in terms of phases. This is really the phases from the NIST 861 Rev 2, but what we've specifically done in ours, based on our experience, is broken out a phase which joined containment and eradication and recovery in one phase. We think from our learning that containment and eradication are incredibly critical, and there are things that you need to pause and make sure you do correctly before you go to recovery. There's going to be business pressure and a lot of pressure in incident response. You can't get away from it. But our common pitfalls that guidance tells us, if you rush containment and eradication, there's a good chance that the threat actor still has a foothold in your environment. And what you could find is that he stops your recovery before you've completed it. And that makes things a lot worse and puts you into an even longer recovery cycle. So just going through some of the questions, we ask people to think more deeply than maybe they've been thinking before. Imagine if you're that person in that scenario. Do you really know who the threat actor is? Do you know how far they've traveled, moved laterally in your environment? Do you know how to identify signs of not just encryption, but staging of data for exfiltration? Do you know how to stop them? What's the best practices? How to contain them? And how do you know to confirm that they're eliminated from your environment? And the answer usually is actually, I doubt we have those skills. So who do you get to help you? What kind of organizations need to be on hand, on call, on retainer to come and help? So those are the kind of things that we ask people to really consider, put themselves in that mindset and try and imagine what they would do and how prepared they are should this thing befall them too.
It makes a ton of sense. And digging into that a little bit more, and we're not going to look at the slide today, but we did ask in this year's Ransomware Trends research what outside parties were involved when, in the case of that research, 1,200 organizations globally, when you got hit by a ransomware attack. And what we found is that folks who have been through this involve a host of outside parties that they need to coordinate, that they need to communicate with, that they need to work through it. Can you talk through some, for our viewers who have been fortunate enough not to go through this themselves, can you talk through who some of those outside parties are that get involved in a ransomware attack recovery and why they're involved?
Yeah, I mean, the most important one I would say is an incident response specialist, really, on retainer. And many organizations that attend the tabletops actually say they have two, because the other critical thing is how quickly can they get boots on the ground to help you as an organization. So even very mature organizations, very large organizations with a big budget, feel that even though they have a lot of skills, that they need incident response on the ground. But also you'll need legal advice, especially if there's signs of exfiltration. You might need to consult with your cyber insurance if you have that. And then you might actually need, depending on how quickly you've contained and eradicated the threat, how you've discovered how far it's moved, how long it's going to take to do the recovery. If you've been able to estimate that, and that's one of the things the incident response people can help you do, estimate recovery time. Do you have enough staff capability to run continuous shifts? Do I need extra hands to the pump? So all those kind of things are what we see, but it also branches into other offshoots of nuggets of information that we learn through doing these, like, I can't access my finance system, so have I got a deal in place to rerun the last payroll, or find a way to do that without the systems in place that I normally have? So there are a lot of other systems that people need to take care of in order to successfully execute the recovery. And maybe they've not thought of all these scenarios until they've been through this learning experience. What we want to do, Jeff, is we want to make sure that they get the benefit of our experience and get the better preparation in place, so they don't have to go through experiential learning. They can get closer to best practice before it happens.
Here, here. That's certainly the goal. We had a good question from Jim in comments asking about how traditional backup is suited for recovering from ransomware attacks. I think you're going to get to that more as we go along, perhaps on the next slide and perhaps in a later one. But Jim, we've got a pin in that. We will come back to it because it's a very relevant question. You're exactly right. Talk us through, Aaron, now what recovery looks like. You just alluded to it. There might be systems that you don't have a backup of the data for, and you've got to somehow reconstitute or rebuild the data. But obviously, that's not the only option. Can you talk us through the sorts of decisions organizations are faced with in this case?
Yeah, I think with this one, these are really your four options. We want the option to be restore from backup, but I'm going to go back to that in a minute. But imagine you couldn't restore from backup. Can you rebuild the data? And couldn't you accept the data loss? Probably not, depending on the system, maybe. Can you acquire the decryption key? Well, we know there are a lot of unknowns with that and a lot of extra risks. So in all these phases, Jeff, I think the important thing is to have quality information, preparedness, and expertise, maybe testing and better preparation. So in my IR tabletop, in the scenario I say, right, it's an attack, it's been identified, we're in the process of containment and eradication. That may discover a wider spread of the attack. We don't know yet. But in parallel, imagine the business come to you and say, do we have viable backups? Now, before an incident, they might say, yes, I've got backup reports and it's all green and it's all good. But they say, are you absolutely sure for these critical systems? And what is the time to recover? And what is the cost to recover? Now, remember I mentioned earlier, you've got to do extra steps like clean the restore or clean the backup to make sure you're not restoring threat out to permanence. So as someone who's managing that environment, they really ask more questions. Well, when was the last time you tested it? And how long did it take? And if you can't answer those questions, you can't really attribute costs, and you can't help the business have a better data-driven strategy for recovery. So that's why a business might be tempted to acquire the decryption key, but all of a sudden, we've got the stat that says 27% don't recover after they acquire their key. So wouldn't it be good to know if the data is recoverable beforehand, so that possibly is an option. What is the cost to acquire the key? Does it have to be what the first ask is, or can it be lower? How much data will be recovered? What is corrupted? And how long will it take to decrypt? Because decryption takes a lot longer than encryption. So you need to have, again, data so you can, have a data-driven decision. Most people rightly say, I'm going to restore from backup, Jeff, but what my injection that I put in, it's kind of like the curveball that I want people to be aware of is, what if at some point, maybe 3 months ago, maybe you've got a third party coming in and helping you manage a critical application. Maybe they added some additional databases, but there was a failure in policy and procedure. Backup's not linked to the asset register, and new databases were created, but they were not configured in a backup. So imagine that happened. You now have a critical database that's not backed up and it's encrypted, and you cannot restore. So we ask people to entertain that thought, and what it does, Jeff, it gives people pause for thought. It naturally leads to a better preparation idea that maybe we should do more restore testing and automated restore testing for critical systems and do it more frequently. But if they haven't already done that, it makes them consider what are the additional risks. Can we rebuild the data? Can we accept the data loss? And how would we more safely and more predictably acquire a decryption key, and will it work, and how long will that take? So it's all about, at this point, trying to come up with a data-driven strategy for our customers, and that's what we're about here at Veeam.
So let's dig into that a little bit more, because folks who have known Veeam for the 15 years that we've been a leading data protection solution know that we've led in backing up virtualized environments for a long time. Obviously, now it covers quite a bit more than that. But there was some big news on the Veeam front. Just a couple of months ago, we acquired a leading incident response firm called Coveware, which is now integrating with Veeam. And why don't you talk us through, for our viewers that are not familiar with Coveware's services, exactly what Coveware brings to the Veeam portfolio?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I probably moved the slide too early and missed the big
No, you're
reveal.
good.
Anyway,
You're good.
we're all good. We're all good. So Coveware are cyber extortion economy experts. They help organizations both in preparation, but during and after an attack, right? And now Veeam were already doing these kind of services. We had our own SWAT team help people with recovery. We have a cyber secure program which helped people prepare, but that preparation was all about having a very secure backup and recovery environment, secure and segmented network, and all those kind of things. But as we've found out many times, there are a lot more things that can go wrong, and so more preparation is needed. So, Coveware have a few stages here, and we've kind of limited them down. But the first one is assessment, and a lot of that is data driven by the database we have of the threat actors. It's very extensive and it's very knowledgeable. We kind of know them intimately. Now, we don't want to create any empathy for them, although we do understand that they are people doing a job and they want to get paid. They are still criminals, so we don't want to create empathy, but by understanding the threat actor and all the things that can go on, gives us a better place to come from in terms of coming up with a better strategy. So understand the client impact. We identify the strain of ransomware, identify that threat actor group. Suddenly we're tapping into all that knowledge, prior knowledge that we have. And this is driven from 50 plus cases a month. We've got data on that threat actor and how they behave. There's 80% of attacks involve encryption as a general rule, but we now know specifically to that actor, 78% exfiltration, but there's 20% say it's exfiltration only, but we also, of those, we know that some are just threatening it and there's no sign of staging or exfiltration, but we also know that can change, right? So we have a tool, one of the software tools that Coveware have brought into the Veeam family is Recon. So this software you run it securely on as many systems as possible. It creates an encrypted packet which we upload to a SaaS platform, and that analyzes what systems were encrypted, what they were encrypted by, are those systems recoverable, what's the volume, but it also gathers artifacts like ransomware notes, helps us identify the threat actor, but it identifies hopefully how they got in, where they moved, how much were they contained, and maps those to MITRE ATT&CK techniques, so we know how to better defend and contain them. So that's one. Quickly through the others. If after we set the strategy, we almost always recommend recovery from backups, but should an organization choose to go further, one of the things you want to get through quickly is negotiation. So hopefully that's negotiation in order to say, no, we have all we need. We don't need you. We will never need you. But moving on to settlement, if they did need them, we not only know how to do this securely, acquire the cryptocurrency if that's what required. We do the compliance checks after identifying the actor. Is it a state-led attack from a country that you're not legally allowed to pay money to? We build all the documentation for you that you might need for legal compliance, and we can help negotiate down that settlement. Even before that, going to the end, we have a tool to safely decrypt files. But the good news is, Jeff, we don't always need the decryption key. We have reverse engineers that we've acquired through Coveware by Veeam who can, unencrypt many systems without acquiring the key. But if we did have to acquire the key, we can deploy inside this software, so you're not using the threat actor tools anymore. It runs up to 6 times faster, and it's fully supported, and we know it's secure. So there's a lot of help from preparation and all the way through up until getting an organization back online and back in business.
Very exciting. And if we look at this visually, I love the next slide that you prepared for today, because it sort of puts in visual perspective what Coveware Incident Response adds to the Veeam portfolio and to what we can do to assure our customers that they do have the best possible options for recovering from an attack. Do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, I'll highlight a few things, right? So this is an amalgamation of all the great things Veeam have been doing and all the great things that can be enhanced and expanded with the help of Coveware by Veeam. So, cast your minds back. Veeam, through our experience of our 550,000 customers, 80,000 of them enterprise size. In 2019, we were the first organization to put in place an automated workflow which scanned restores with antivirus to make sure you weren't bringing back threat actor permanents, because we knew uniquely that recovery was key. But in terms of, we also known through our surveys and through our experience that integrating both the cyber teams and the backup teams were critical, but it doesn't just start there. It also could start with integrating the technology. So, we did a number of things. We expanded the automated workflows from AV to AV and Yara rules. We built integrations with the SIM. So, we can pass relevant information, things that might be threats, someone trying to add users to the Veeam environment, someone attempting to delete backups. So there's meaningful signals to SIM, but also from endpoint detection tools, host-based detection tools. We talked about behavioral EDR, all these specific security tools, which are best suited to detect an attack early on in the life cycle of a threat actor, can now raise an API alert to Veeam. It does two things. It allows us to take an automated workflow and back up that data quickly, hopefully before the later stage of the attack, like encryption has happened. And then it informs the backup teams that something might be going on in their backups, so they can get on the front foot and start cleaning and validating whether those backups have threat actor permanence. So there's a lot of things that Veeam were doing for the last 5 years. But now, really, if you add all those things I talked about with incident response from Coveware, adding recon capability into the Veeam data platform, but then embedding the Coveware capabilities into the Veeam cybersecure program, I think you've
really got the whole package.
We've got the whole package. And if I just flip onto the cybersecure program as we get towards, in the before, a lot of great training content. We talked about wanting our customers to have the benefit of our experience. Now you've got Veeam running a SWAT team, which helps customers and help them for many years recover from cyber attacks. And you've got Coveware helping quarterback the whole incident response. Now we're putting all that training into the before. What happens when it happens? Best practices in incident response. What are the common pitfalls? Bringing executives and business leaders into that, so that helps with business impact analysis. It helps maybe get funding, the right funding to get things done. Then, through an incident, you've got the SWAT team, but you've now got Coveware on potentially on incident response retainer as an option, but also as an escalation point for our own SWAT team, and then all the documentation you might need, and of course the
Which
great
is
5 million
critical.
and the
Right.
great $5 million warranty that we offer to help people with their expenses.
Yep, exactly. Folks, if you're interested in what we've talked about today, please reach out to your local reseller or Veeam account team. We're delighted to talk with you more about Coveware and about the Veeam Cybersecure program. We're at time for today's talk, but I also wanted to let you know this Thursday, July 18th, we will have a special 1-hour session where we have a deep dive into migration demos and perspectives that matter for SMBs. We are having more talks with organizations about moving platforms, particularly their virtualization platform here at Veeam than we ever have before. And we're going to do a deep dive and demo into how that looks like and how Veeam can help on Thursday. Also, next Tuesday, July 23rd, I will be back and I'll be joined then by Veeam Field Chief Information Security Officer for the Americas, Ray Heffer, who is going to talk about field perspectives on security, on regulatory compliance, and the main challenges that organizations are facing now on that front going into the second half of 2024. Folks, as always, thank you so much for joining us on today's live stream. And Aaron, really enjoyed, as always, the chance to talk with you. Thank you so much for being on and sharing what we've learned from the tabletops.
Thanks, Jeff. It was a pleasure.